Want help to grow your business? Download Bryn, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit bryn.ai or search the App Store today.
Hi everyone, welcome to the first issue of Think Global China edition. My name's David Thomas and I'm going to talk to you about why I think every small business needs to have a strategy around the big opportunity that is the China market. And here's what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to talk to you about the opportunity to sell to 1 billion people. By the end of 2030, we reckon there'll be 1 billion middle class in China. That's a huge opportunity for all of us. Here's what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about some of the stats and the power and the size of the market. I'm going to share some of those with you. I'm going to give you an overview of some of China's priorities and some of their long and short-term goals. We're going to look at the industries that are perhaps most relevant to us right now and how that impacts you. I'm going to give you a quick lesson in geography so we can see how big China is and how much it's changing. I'm going to help you segment the market and decide where a good entry point might be. And I'm definitely going to tell you why every small business needs to create a China strategy. And then finally, I'm also going to tell you about the ultra-rich consumers in China, what they want, and why I think that could be some of your high priority opportunities in the short term. So let's get started. First of all, my name's David Thomas. I've got a long history and journey with China. It started right back in 1989, my first visit to Beijing. Since then, I've been taking groups to China, delegations, study tours, missions. Here's one that we took in 2006, a great photograph of us all on the Great Wall. And these days, my missions are more business delegations. This was one which we took to Guangzhou in 2013, where I had a whole range of people looking to raise money, to get to look for business opportunities and partnerships in the China market. I've been going to China and dealing with China for the last 20 years or so, so I'm really delighted to share some of my learnings and insights with you. Now, first of all, I just want to talk to you about China. There's a 1.3 billion people in China, which is a massive number of people. But as I said earlier, about 1 billion of them are going to be middle-class consumers in the next 10 to 20 years. Just remember that China is growing in terms of its GDP growth at about 7% a year at the moment. That means that effectively every 10 years or so it's going to double. So in 10 years' time, China will be double the current size. It's already a big economy and growing very fast. And in 20 years' time, it will be 4 times the size it is now. So we're all impacted by China. Everybody around the world is now looking at how China is impacting on their property market, on their consumer market, and looking for opportunities to participate in the large amount of investment coming out of China and starting to spread around the world. And that's really where I'd like to start, which is with their 5-year plan. Now, China's an unusual market because it starts with a plan. That's quite unusual in the Western context. They actually don't just have a plan, they have a 5-year plan, and they renew it every 5 years, looking for new growth and opportunities in the future. But if you look back over past 5-year plans, what you realize is that when China sets a goal or a milestone or a target, they achieve it most of the time. So when they set their objectives for the next 5 years, we can be very clear about what's happening. We're actually coming to the end of this 5-year plan, which I think has been quite transformational, because instead of focusing on the quantity of their growth, they're now starting to look at the quality of it. And that creates opportunities for all of us in the Western world, where we have access to innovation, design, and a whole range of things that China now needs. And most of this is already identified for us in the 5-year plan. And we're about to see the next 5-year plan that will cover the period going into next year and beyond. Now, China has 3 key priorities in this 5-year plan, and the first one is what we call going out. Now, I think that going out is really relevant to all of us because this is about China moving money, moving people, resources, capital from inside China to outside China and diversifying into new markets, getting access to new technologies, new currencies, new markets around the world. and looking to participate in new industries. And we're seeing this wave of investment coming out of China starting to accelerate quite rapidly. And I think that creates opportunities for everyone, not least small business that generally does things in an innovative way. And it's not just public money, institutional, state-owned enterprises and government money that's being driven out. It's now private money as well. So ultra-high net worth individuals, entrepreneurs, private sector companies now looking to establish a global footprint. And as China goes out, we can all participate. Now this map of the world shows you the sort of deals that China's been doing over the last 5 years in one sector. That's the mining and resources sector, a sector that's been very important up until now because they're basically focused on energy security, looking to participate in the supply chain around hard commodities, mining and resources in many different countries, and looking to get some access to that supply so that they can feel more secure about having access to it in the future. And when you look at this map, you can see that the diversification of Chinese investment overseas has gone everywhere, into Europe, into Africa, into Latin America, into Australia, and also around America too. So this going out strategy has been in place now for about a decade or so, and is now starting to accelerate quite rapidly. But remember, this is just one sector. These dots represent deals done in one sector, the mining and resources sector. And what we're now starting to see is investment flow into new areas. And I think that's what's exciting for all of us, particularly those of us who are not involved in the mining and resources space. If you look at this on a different type of scale, this map actually picks up all the deals done by China across all the sectors around the world. And there's been a big shift in the last 12 months from the mining and resources space to new sectors like infrastructure, like healthcare, like leisure, education, and in a range of other areas, particularly real estate. And most people I know are now starting to talk about the rapid rise in prices in their local property market due to Chinese investors. And that's highlighted to some extent in this map that shows the size and scale of the investment going overseas. As you would expect, the US is number one in terms of outbound investment, the destination for that. But actually Australia, which is quite a small country with only 20 million people, is actually number two at the moment in terms of Chinese outbound investment. And there are many other areas starting to receive that kind of investment as well. So as China goes out, it looks to diversify, it looks to innovate, it looks to grow and get access to global customers, and it looks to participate in new industries and new innovation with a view to getting access to that innovation and bringing it back to China. Remember, China is a big country. It's starting from a fairly low base. And in order for them to get access to innovation and technology, they have to go out and start participating in global markets. I think that's really exciting for all of us. And after the break, I'm going to talk a little bit about the next priority for China, which is to go west. So as I said just before the break, China is going out, and I want to explain some of the key drivers behind that. The first is around security of supply. So as I said, energy security has been a big driver of this in the past, but future drivers will be around food, feeding 1 billion people, technology, innovation, and key sectors that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. So that's one of the drivers, but there are others too. Diversification. China has a lot of US dollars. It needs to diversify into different currencies, different countries, and different markets, and it's in the process of doing that by investing overseas. Another area is to diversify. If you're a Chinese company in your own home market, you're going to struggle to keep growing at double digits if you're just simply in your own domestic market. So we find many companies are now starting to look at investing overseas so that they can get exposure to global customers around the world and start to drive their business into a global company, not just a China company. And another key driver is around influence. China now has a lot of influence in the global economy. It's pretty hard to pick up a paper now without reading about China. When China goes to America, the red carpet gets rolled out for them. That didn't happen 10 years ago. China is now at the table for pretty much every global economic decision that gets made, whether it's around climate change or around global conflicts or geopolitics, China is now involved in decisions that get taken around the world. And it's pretty hard now for any country, particularly the US, to regard itself as a unipolar influence globally. China and other countries are now starting to play a big part. That's a big change for China. They've had 200 years of what they call shame and humiliation, where China's growth has been pretty much non-existent. They've lived through a cultural revolution. They're now coming out of that and starting to play a major role in the global economy. And that's very significant as we see Chinese entrepreneurs, investors, and business people travel around the world and start to participate in markets around the world. So these are big drivers of China's going out strategy. But they also have another big driver, which I call going west. This is all about starting to move economic activity and investment from where it used to be, which was along the eastern seaboard, into some of the inner western areas. And this gives me a chance to talk you through some of the geography around China. Firstly, this is a city called Chongqing. I don't know if you've ever been there or heard of it, but it has a population of 30 million people. It's right in inner western China. I'll show it to you now on the map. Here it is. It's right in the middle of this circle. And actually that circle, while we're talking about it, is basically the plan for China to go west. Now, when I lived down in Hong Kong in the south in the 80s and 90s, a lot of the initial investment into China went into those southern areas. We call it the Pearl River Delta or Guangdong Province, Guangzhou, some of these first-tier cities that are down there in the south. That's where the first part of China opened up. Then as we moved into the 80s and 90s, it went up the eastern seaboard to Shanghai, which you probably know is now a very fast, well-developed and first-tier city, but a lot of investment took place in there. And then, of course, as we got to the Olympics in 2008, a lot of growth and a lot of activity and investment went into the north, into Beijing. But now the future growth is shifting into this inner western region as part of what we call their going west strategy. And some of the cities in the middle of this circle that perhaps you've never heard of, and I'd be surprised if you've been to many of them, are the center point of that activity. And there's perhaps no more relevant city than Chongqing. Right there on the Yangtze River, you see it, a population of 30 million people, a municipality of Beijing, and perhaps the central focus of China's Go West strategy, which will start to permeate and spread into some of the surrounding areas like Chengdu, Wuhan, Xi'an. These are all cities that will benefit from what we call China going west. And that creates really exciting opportunities for companies looking to go into China for the first time that might have missed out on the wave of opportunity that's taken place already along the East Coast, now have the opportunity to go into new markets in that inner western region. And when we look at the growth rates of those regions, I've put the total growth rate for China there, which is currently about 7.4%. But if you look at some of those red blobs, you can see that some of these second-tier cities, as we call them, particularly in that inner western region, are growing at double digits. Chongqing, as I said, a city of 30 million people in an area that's called a municipality, growing at double-digit growth there. Chongqing is the center point of this Go West strategy and creates opportunities for everyone. So I'm often saying to people that when you look at China and you're trying to think about where your entry point might be, you should perhaps start looking at these second-tier, high-growth inner western cities, which are receiving now significant investment from the central government as they implement this Go West strategy. Now, another key priority, remember I've talked about going out, I've talked about going west. The third key priority is going green. Now, China has, over the last 30 years, pretty much polluted their environment.
To continue enjoying this presentation, download Brin, the world's first business advisor in your pocket. To find out more, visit brin.ai or search the App Store today.